Farmers today are facing rising costs, volatile markets, and extreme weather. The Better Way to Farm podcast digs into strategies to help you take control of farm inputs and maximize profit so your farm can thrive for generations. Remember to take advantage of our free resources at abetterwaytofarm.com. Now, from America's Heartland, here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode. We're excited to have you tune in as we dive into the world of soybeans. Rod here to Better Way to Farm, where we increase yields and improve profits and strive every day to make the world a little bit better place. This was brought about by a follower of ours named Lucas. He put out some questions on soybeans, and what he was saying was, his idea was, where could we go to find the keys to soybean success? And then he said jokingly, maybe a soybeans 101 course. And I thought that was interesting. And then my brain got to running around, and I thought, well, maybe what we could do is we could do a tongue-in-cheek episode, and we would call it How to Grow Really Average Soybeans, because a lot of people are doing that, and they're following that age-old proven system for growing soybeans, and that is that they go into the plant them, they spray them, they cut them, and then they complain about them. And ladies and gentlemen, if your plan is plant, spray, cut, and complain, that is not a high management program. Lucas brought out a lot of really good points of things that I want to talk about, and I appreciate him doing that. He opened with, he said, our soybeans were not near what we thought they would be. We were really disappointed. We thought for sure we'd have some in the 70s, and we didn't even come close. He's also fighting that deal once in a while we run across where he spoke of the fact that he's farming with a relative, and the relative is still holding the reins pretty tightly. And I understand that. When you build it, you want to hang on to it. And then I know the other side of it of trying to figure out how to integrate the younger generation and let them have some say in it. But I think soybeans, guys, is a place where we might want to be open to taking a look at doing something different. So let's dive in here. Let's talk about what they said they were doing. They said that their corn gets all the fertilizer. What they do is they fertilize for 2 years, and I put 2 years in air quotation marks there. They fertilize for 2 years. The corn gets all the fertilizer. The only thing they do to their soybeans is they do inoculate them with a nitrogen-fixing bacteria. And I consider that nitrogen-fixing bacteria to be a great component of successful beans. Well, let's talk for a minute about that idea of fertilizing for 2 years. What do we know? Well, we know that when we apply a dry broadcast program, that we are going to get back about 20% of the dry broadcast that we put out. And knowing that we only get 20% the first year is not a great plan, but the real problem becomes one when we realize that we get 1 to 2% the second year. So when we fertilize for that corn, the corn gets advantage of about 20% of what we put out there. And then the second year, the soybeans are there to fight their way through and try and figure out how to take advantage of 1 to 2%, because that's all we could reasonably expect to get back. Guys, when we treat our soybeans like this, we're not going to get those big yields. I'm going to share a story here later about a friend of ours from Nebraska. Just some of the things that we see. I'm going to share several stories probably before this is over with, just to drive home some points. Or some of them are kind of humorous, but hopefully to make everybody think and to drive home the point on how to get this done. So from our standpoint, we believe that doing a 2-year fertilization program, I understand you save on the application cost. I understand it really hurts you on the yield. I don't think that's a good idea. What are we going to do? Well, the first thing we'd like to see you do with a soybean, no different than a corn crop, a cotton crop, a rice crop, whatever it is, we would like to see a soil test. We like to pull those tests every year in the fall. We get a baseline after 3 to 5 years and see what we've got. And of course, that soil test has to be a complete one. We're not just looking at NP and K, but we want to know the CEC and the organic matter. We definitely want to know about those levels of those secondaries and those micronutrients. Because guys, we can really move the needle and make a big difference. If you knew the number of people that we've picked up as new clients that over the last 3 to 4 years, we've actually probably picked up more people who want to work with us because their soybean yields are not satisfactory to them. One of my favorite stories comes from a good friend, Mike, and Mike reached out to me and he said, I want to talk to you. He said, our corn, we're doing good. We're growing really good corn. We're 240, 260 range on corn. But he said, we just can't beat 50 bushel on soybeans. We just can't do it. And that's not sufficient. And he had actually went to one of his advisors, and his advisor said, well, what are you growing? Mike said 50 bushel. And they said, well, that's good enough. You just kind of plant soybeans as a filler crop till you can get back to corn. That's not a great attitude, guys. That's not how we remodel the kitchen or how we buy a car or how we expand our operation. And right here on my desk pad, I'm sitting at my desk tonight, and in purple ink at the top of the desk pad, it says good enough, comma, ain't. And Sheila and I learned that a long time ago. We were working for a company, and that was kind of their standard, was good enough. And Sheila and I didn't do good enough very well. And as a matter of fact, that company is no longer in business. And it just breaks my heart to hear people say, well, that's good enough. 50 bushel beans is not good enough unless you're in some really dry land area. But in an area where we can grow 250 bushel, 260 bushel corn, we need to be doing better growing soybeans than 50 bushel. So what did Randy do? What did some of these guys do? Number one, they soil tested. We cell test every acre. We check out and see what we've got, and we take a look at it. And then we sit down and we analyze what are our deficiencies, what are our problems, what's our limiting factors, and how are we going to fix those? How are we going to address those? And we come back and we do like to row place on soybeans. And I know a lot of people, they cringe at that. But the fact of the matter is, if you have the right CEC and the right organic matter, and you're using the right rate of fertilizer, not only is it a great idea, it's an idea that will make you a lot of money and will actually work. And I get people say, well, you'll hurt the germination. If you're using the wrong product, you absolutely will hurt the germination. You want to be very careful with that. With our product, we're geared to go up to about a 3-gallon rate in the trench. We like to use a rebounder or a Keaton seed firmer with a why not splitter on the end of it and put it right there. The next big mistake that we see made on a fairly regular basis is population. So many people, especially people who are older like I am, were hung up back still living in the 70s when soybeans didn't germ as well, and we typically drilled them, and our drills looked a great deal like a controlled spill. And we knew we needed to plant 200,000 to end up with 160 or whatever we thought we needed. But the fact of the matter is, guys, the 70s called, and they'll let you keep the great music that they had, but their ideas on farming back then probably need to be revisited and reevaluated. And the fact is, we don't need that many soybeans out there. I know Chris did a population test this year, and the lower population won. I think my favorite story is I have a father-son duo that we work with up in South Dakota, and they were planting 180 to 185,000 consistently, and I convinced the son to do some strips. And guys, here's the deal. We get on social media, and I am amazed at the number of people who just want to have an argument and tell us that we're wrong. And all I'm asking you to do is prove it. I'm not asking you to believe what I say, but what I don't understand is people who are planting 160 or 180,000 and they refuse to do strips. They just use that age-old line. Everybody knows that's what you got to do. Guys, this isn't hard to test. Make strips. Start at 85,000. Do 85, 95, 105. Jump it by 10,000 or jump it by 15 and run it from down around 85,000 all the way up to where you're currently running. If that's 140, 160, whatever it is. And then combine them and pay attention to what you get. This particular father-son duo, Dad was about my age. He was very adamant that they were going to continue to plant 185,000 because that's what you did. And the son went out and did the strips. And oftentimes is the case, and he came in exactly like I predicted. Most of the time, somewhere between 120 and 125,000 population is the best yield. It's not, of course, it makes the most money because if you can get the most yield for less seed, you make more money. Now, once in a while, we've had 85,000 win the population contest while winning the yield contest simultaneously. But historically, somewhere 120, 125 is a pretty safe place to be. So they did this. The son called me. He said, Rod, you're 100% correct. The number one yielder, 125,000. And he said, so guess what Dad's going to do? And I said, plant 125,000. He said, nope, we're going to move down from 185 to 165. And then there was this really awkward silence on the phone because I don't know what to say to that. I don't know what happens when we test something ourselves on our own farm and we prove it, but we're so afraid to make a change. We're so scared to do something different that we go back to the old habit that we already know isn't the best idea. And that is mind-blowing to me. And we see this on a fairly regular basis. And I just want to encourage you guys, we're going to make money in soybeans. let's control this population. Number one thing we want to say is, hey, what are we going to do here to cut down on seed cost? Number two, what are we going to do here in order that we can get the most yield, the absolute top yield? Because that's what we're really after, is yield is still king. And so I just want to encourage you, study that. There's no reason to get on social media and say, oh, you're just wrong. You don't understand. In my area, you got to do 180,000. And I ask you why? Have you proven it? Have you tested it? Have you stripped it? So I know I've spent some time here, guys, but I think there's a lot of money to be made. Run the population test yourself. Next thing we're going to do after we go out and we figure out the right population and we figure out what micronutrients we need, what secondaries and what macros, then let's come back in here and get those babies up and get them running. And then let's take a tissue test. And there are multiple windows to foliar feed. I'm seeing a lot of press come out. A lot of the companies are coming out and they're talking about foliar feeding really late, like R5 or R6. I don't have any experience at R6, but I know R6 is what I was always told was R6 is a totally mature soybean. By definition, if it's totally mature, then there's nothing left to do to it but wait on it to get dry. And so I'm a little nervous about that and running counter to what a lot of people say. We believe the most important window to foliar feed corn or beans is V3. Why is that? Because common sense says, well, there's a lot of exposed dirt. You're going to get a lot of nutrients in the soil. It's not going to go into the leaf. Well, first of all, if you're using the right nutrients, there is an attraction and they will be attracted into the leaves. So that loss is not as substantial as most people want to think. Secondly, why at V3? Why do we want to do this at the V3 stage? Because that's when that young plant is still trying to really get going. And if we can take that corn plant at a V3 or that bean plant at a V3 and really soup it up, then we can make big changes. You know, the fact of the matter is, if we're raising animals, we raise cattle here, and if we have cattle that are lacking in nutrition when they're little, and there's something wrong there with them, they never recover. They don't ever go to town with the others, with the healthy ones. And so nutrition is key in a new animal. Nutrition is key in a new plant. And so we want to do that. So we pull the tissue test. We get back our recommendations, and they do come back with recommendations. Most companies that tissue test, they give you back the normals. They give you back what you have, and they say, good luck. With us, you're going to get normals. You're going to get what your levels are, and then you're going to get a recommendation down to as finite as ounces per acres of micronutrients. And so we're not into the shotgun approach. I see guys trying to grow soybeans. They say, we tried this, we tried that. I see people in the industry selling products and we ought to try some of this or try that, try this combination. Guys, I'm okay with you experimenting, I really am. But I think that those of us who come to you with products that you need to use should have some science behind what we're going to say. And I can look you in the eye and say, you need to use zinc because you're deficient in zinc in here. And that's going to make a bigger leaf and it's going to help you set up for better yield. You need to have manganese in here because you're deficient in manganese. And that's going to help make this plant darker green and make the photosynthesis work better and on and on. And so we want to run through all of those. You're deficient in copper and that's going to leave you really exposed to more disease, more pathogens to come in. We want to fix that. So that first window to us is the most important. Now, when I talked to Mike up there, I talked to Randy, I know those guys both, they went full boat. They came in, they put something down when they planted, they came back, they foliar fed at V3. These guys actually hit them again at V8, and then they came back in there at that R2 stage and hit them one more time. Do I think there might be another window at R4? Maybe, yeah, possibly. And I think that we're seeing a lot of publicity around, I guess, the idea of applying potassium late to increase seed size. Will that work? I believe absolutely it will. When we started 30 years ago, it was very common to see guys foliar feeding a 318-18 to try and get that seed bigger on that soybean plant. However, does it make sense to you that we wouldn't want to wait till R2 to fix a potassium need? Why would we not want to beef that potassium level up in that plant at V3? Why not do it when that plant is little? And then all the way through, let's meet those needs and let's get it doing what it's doing. I think there is the potential to get some significant increase later, but I think we've already left a bunch of yield on the table if we do that. And I just don't think that that's what we want to do. I don't think we want to leave that lay on the table. I think we want to try and pick all that up all the way through as what we can. So guys, what are we going to do? We're going to soil test. We're going to row place. We're going to get our populations right. We're going to tissue test. We're going to foliar feed that first shot there at V3. We're going to take a second look at maybe V8. We're definitely going to take a good hard look at R2. Sometimes guys are putting fungicide on then, and we have a 26% nitrogen that is really excellent for jacking that plant up and getting it all fired up and getting it to do more and put on some more yield. And that's one of the things we're looking at. And we will start doing more work at a later foliar feed with some 318-18 and talking about, what are we doing in the way of seed size? We know potassium does increase that. So the bottom line is, I'll just kind of get close to closing with this story. I got a friend out in Nebraska. He's been a client for 3 years, farms with a neighboring farmer. And Karen posted his story on Facebook, this friend out in Nebraska, and he said that he farmed with a neighbor, but they have separate operations. They just work together. And his neighbor was kind of underwhelmed with the idea of doing what our friend was doing, using all of our stuff, making those extra 2 trips through the field to spray, kind of getting into that high management where we were making those 2 extra trips. And then they got ready to harvest. They pull their beans out, and the gentleman who is working with us, his beans were making about 84 bushels to the acre. And his neighbor, who did the high management program called Plant Spray, Cut, and Complain, actually had pretty good beans for that program. He had 62 bushel. But guys, when we can pick up 12 bushel of beans, even at $10, is 120 bucks an acre for a couple of trips through there and about $30 worth of investment. That's a significant profit margin to be having. And that's what we're talking about here is how are we going to get these bean yields to get up into those 80s? That's what I think we need to be looking at this day and age. If we're going to continue to farm soybeans and make them profitable, we're going to have to get into that 80 and up. I know my friend up in Minnesota, we're working on a plan because now his next yield goal is to cut 100 bushel beans. And not in some test plot somewhere, but to just grow 100 bushel beans. And guys, I know that's unheard of 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, probably. But that's kind of where we're headed if we're going to be serious and make money in this game. So if you'd really like to see a course called Soybeans 101, I would encourage you to reach out to us. We do the program called the Fundamentals of Agronomy. We're going to be doing those all across the Midwest here coming up. We would love to meet you at one of those Fundamentals of Agronomy, and we'll talk about Soybean 101, what to do, how to do it, when to do it, what's the right rate, what's the right product, what's the right place, what's the right time. We're going to get into all of that. We really do believe in the 4 R's. We'd like to help you embrace that. And we'd like to set you down with a bunch of other growers who are like you and that they're trying to do better. They're not satisfied with the status quo. They're saying, hey, man, how are we going to get to that next yield level? We've only done 68. How are we going to get to 80? We've done 85. How are we going to get to 95? We've done 97. How are we going to get to 100? And that's what we're going to be talking about is how to do better while not spending any more money. Bottom line is I'm sitting here looking at a paper that one of our clients sent us, and he did an analysis talking about how to grow corn for the lowest price per bushel. And he's got multiple programs in there. And guys, I think that's worthy of all of us spending some time on and thinking about, because the bottom line here is how are we going to grow them soybeans for the lowest cost per bushel. Guys, we really do appreciate you tuning in. We love being a little bitty part of your life. Thank you for being followers. Thank you guys for listening. I hope harvest is winding down safely for you, and we really do hope you're having a better day.